Now, Canada and China have struck a deal that will slash tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles and Canadian farm products.
A major geopolitical shift is quietly unfolding, and its consequences are about to hit North America's tourism and border economies harder than anyone expected. Canada and China have entered a new phase of cooperation.
The announcement marks a notable shift in the relationship between Canada and China, one that signals a deliberate effort to move beyond years of tension and uncertainty.
One that fundamentally changes travel, trade, and influence across the region. At the center of it is a landmark decision: visa-free travel between Canada and China for stays of up to 30 days. This single move rewires how millions of people travel, where money flows, and which countries benefit. Before we go deeper, if you value clear, in-depth analysis like this, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss stories that shape the global balance of power. The announcement came after a high-level meeting in Beijing, marking the first Canadian prime ministerial visit to China in nearly a decade. Years of frozen diplomacy, trade disputes, arrests, retaliatory bans, and near-total breakdown had defined the relationship. That long impasse is now over. What emerged instead was not a symbolic handshake, but a concrete strategic reset with immediate economic consequences. Visa-free access means Canadian passport holders can now enter China without applications, fees, embassy visits, or weeks of uncertainty. Travelers simply book a flight and go. Canada joins a select group of countries granted this privilege, while U.S. citizens remain subject to a complex, costly, and time-consuming visa process. That difference alone creates a powerful advantage for Canadian travelers, airlines, and tourism operators. The scale of impact is massive. Canada is home to roughly 2 million people of Chinese origin, spread across every major metropolitan area. These communities maintain deep personal, family, business, and cultural ties with China. Under the old system, even routine travel involved paperwork and delays. Under the new system, spontaneous trips become possible. Family emergencies, business opportunities, cultural events, and short visits no longer require weeks of preparation. This change also eliminates a long-standing travel pattern that heavily benefited the United States. For years, many Chinese Canadians routed their trips through U.S. airports like Seattle, San Francisco, Los Angeles, or Detroit to access cheaper flights or better connections. That meant spending on U.S. hotels, restaurants, rental cars, airport fees, and local businesses. With direct, visa-free travel now available from Canadian cities, those stopovers disappear entirely. The spending goes with them. The same shift applies to Chinese tourists visiting Canada. Before this change, a large portion of visitors from China entered North America through U.S. cities, spent time touring there, and then crossed into Canada by land. This two-country itinerary made sense when visas were required and flights favored U.S. hubs. Visa-free access to Canada removes the incentive. Travelers can now fly directly into Vancouver or Toronto, stay entirely in Canada, and return home without ever touching U.S. soil. Industry analysts expect Chinese tourism to Canada to double within a few years, rising from roughly 300,000 annual visitors to around 600,000. Every one of those additional arrivals represents hotel stays, restaurant spending, shopping, transportation, and entertainment dollars flowing into Canada instead of U.S. border cities. This is not a temporary disruption. It is a permanent rerouting of tourism traffic. The timing makes the impact even sharper. Canada is set to co-host the 2026 FIFA World Cup, with major matches in Toronto and Vancouver. Global events of this scale generate enormous international travel. Chinese fans are expected in large numbers, and visa-free access removes the biggest barrier to attendance. Those visitors will arrive directly in Canada, stay in Canadian cities, and spend their money there. Border cities in the United States that once captured spillover tourism will be bypassed entirely. Airports and communities most exposed are already facing the reality. Seattle-Tacoma International Airport has long functioned as a Pacific gateway for travelers connecting between Canada and Asia. Buffalo depends heavily on cross-border tourism linked to Niagara Falls. Detroit benefits from Canadian travelers using its airport for international routes. With direct Canada to China travel expanding, these revenue streams dry up. Landing fees, passenger spending, hotel occupancy, retail sales, and tax revenues all decline together. An entire service industry also vanishes. Visa-free travel eliminates the need for application processing, document preparation, translation services, and immigration consulting tied to China travel. This travel shift is only one piece of a much larger realignment. The visa decision sits within a broader Canada-China partnership that includes energy cooperation, expanded agricultural trade, reduced tariffs, electric vehicle quotas at preferential rates, cultural exchanges, and long-term investment. Canada is rapidly diversifying away from reliance on the U.S. market, building alternative channels that reduce vulnerability to trade pressure. That diversification was not accidental. It was accelerated by years of unpredictability, tariff threats, and hostile rhetoric coming from Washington. Instead of forcing compliance, pressure produced the opposite result. Canada sought stability elsewhere and found it in structured, negotiated agreements that offered clear terms and follow-through. The consequences for the United States are structural, not political. Cities have no authority over visa regimes, and airports cannot override federal trade or foreign policy decisions. Local governments that depend on cross-border movement are effectively locked into outcomes shaped far above them. As travel routes are rerouted, infrastructure adjusts, and capital follows new demand centers, the previous system cannot simply be switched back on. Once travelers change habits and airlines redesign networks, reversal becomes extremely difficult, regardless of future political leadership. Airlines are already responding to the new incentives. Direct Canada to China routes are being expanded, frequencies increased, and new city pairs evaluated. These decisions are based on multi-year forecasts, not short-term politics. Once aircraft are assigned, crews trained, and airport slots secured, those routes become embedded in the global aviation system. At the same time, Canadian airports are investing in capacity upgrades, lounge expansions, and passenger services designed specifically for long-haul Asian travel, reinforcing Canada's role as the primary gateway. The hospitality and tourism sectors are moving in parallel. Hotels are hiring Mandarin-speaking staff, integrating Chinese payment platforms, adapting food offerings, and redesigning marketing campaigns to target travelers arriving directly from China. Retailers, tour operators, and transportation services are aligning with the same demographic shift. These investments are not experimental. They are built on the assumption that visa-free travel will persist and expand. Once this ecosystem matures, it creates a self-reinforcing loop that attracts even more visitors. Visa-free travel also produces a quieter but more durable transformation: behavioral change. When travel becomes simple, predictable, and frictionless, people internalize that ease as the new normal. Trips that once required weeks of planning become routine. Business relationships deepen. Family visits become more frequent. Over time, travelers stop considering alternative routes entirely. Convenience hardens into habit, and habit reshapes the map. Canada becomes the natural entry point. the United States shifts from a hub to a detour. For Canada, the gains compound over time. Tourism revenue increases, employment expands across airports, hotels, logistics, and retail, and major cities strengthen their positions as global connectors. Beyond economics, the country gains diplomatic credibility by demonstrating that it can diversify partnerships without isolation or confrontation. It sends a signal to other nations that Canada is capable of independent strategy, pragmatic negotiation, and long-term planning. For U.S. border cities, the losses accumulate just as steadily. Declining passenger volumes reduce airport income. Hotels face lower occupancy rates. Restaurants and retail lose foot traffic. Fewer visitors mean fewer service jobs, shrinking tax bases, and tighter municipal budgets. China expanded its access, and the United States, by miscalculating leverage, forfeited its intermediary role. Once that role is lost, it is not easily recovered, and that is why this story matters now. If you want to stay ahead of developments like this, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. More deep analysis is coming, and you won't want to miss what happens next.